So I've been catching a bunch of spawning fish. Got him. That's a big one. And it always amazes me, like, how much these videos correlate to these tournaments, dude. So watch the Bassmaster Classic, won on a wacky rig, right? Watch the Redcrest Cup, wasn't won on a wacky rig, but dude, a lot of the guys, David Dudley, a lot of the guys in the top 10 that made it past that knockout round were using a wacky rig. That's what we've been talking about, is different ways to use a wacky rig that either replace the minnow or allow you to fish for some of these spawning fish without seeing them. So I wanna give you a little more in-depth look on how a lot of these pro guys, and me, who's not a hashtag pro, but I kind of figured out a little something, have been using a wacky rig to cover water during the spawn season and cover water from deep to shallow and get bit. You just gotta slow down a little. Hit that like and subscribe button. I'm gonna show you the juice on a wacky rig for freaking staging and spawning fish. See you later, honey. There's so much I need to show you in this video. I don't know if I can pack it all in. There's a lot of little details that matter. I'm either using for this wacky rig your standard kind of like Yamamoto style stick bait. It's gotta have salt in it though when you're doing this wacky rig deal. The other thing that I'm using is a downsized stick bait like this Daiwa. And I showed this to you in a video back in winter when we were talking about how to use a worm during winter when the water temps are too cool. The most important part is it's gotta have the salt, dude. It's gotta have the salt. What I'm doing with it is a couple things. I'm looking for targets on the bank, tree falls, yellow spots, a stump sticking up in the water, a buoy with like a little line down. That's a sneaky one, dude, because a lot of guys will put like a brick at the bottom of a buoy and that'll be a hard spot those fish can get on. Our setup for this is usually like 12-pound braid to anywhere from an 8 to 12-pound leader. You can go to the sinking braids like the Sunline in that. That'll make your bait go down a little bit quicker, especially if you're fishing some deeper stuff, ultra clear water, ultra clear, deeper bedding fish. I'm skipping it. I'm flicking it around. I'm not making super long casts because I'm fishing what I can see. It's basically, David Dudley said a great thing in the Redcrest. He's got his forward-facing sunglasses on. You're fishing what you can see in a 10 to 20 foot radius. I'm not trying to make super long casts. I don't want to be on top of something, but I'm just trying to put that thing near a target where I can visualize a bed might be. You know, we're on the water. Every time you're on the water during this time of year, you see those beds and they're empty a lot of times, right? What you need to do is just imagine, like if you're going down the bank, if you're going over a flat, where should those fish be? Do you see a little stick coming out of the water? Do you see a little pad sticking out of the water? And you're just pitching your bait near that, hoping that a fish is setting up and bedding or staging near that. This is where I'm a little sneaky. So I'm using it to cover water, so I'm throwing to these targets, but a lot of times I'll run into a dock, right? What I'll do is I'll take my wacky rig, I got it all set up, right? It's weightless, it's sinking, and I'll actually turn it into a Nico rig, dude. So I got my little 16th ounce tungsten weights. It's something I always carry with me, whether I'm doing that Cast Prodigy swim bait trick or whether I'm doing this. You'll learn with like a wacky rig, it's more of like a stall bait. You know, when we're fishing that minnow, oftentimes we're fishing it fairly quick or it's swimming through the water. What happens with this wacky rig is when you actually swim it through the water, like the video we did, this is what they were doing in the Bassmaster Classic. I find it so funny, dude. Like we literally shot a video back in winter about stalling and using this worm, this Nico rig, to sort of stall and replace the minnow as these fish kind of move towards that pre-spawn or into that pre-spawn to staging mode. What happens is, even with that little 16th ounce weight, embedded in the nose of that stick bait, you get a very slow fall, but you get more of a fall and more of a vertical presentation. So you can basically skip that thing under a dock much better than you can a minnow or things along those lines. And using forward facing, you know, I'm looking at them, seeing that they're suspended under this dock, waiting to go into the flat that's right behind the dock, and I'm just shaking it to them, dude. Just covering that water, pop, 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 and I never have to change baits. That's kind of the cool thing. So I can be on a flat, I move out, maybe there's a ditch right out there, there's a couple docks on the very back end, the back third of the creek, and those fish are still staging under that dock. I caught a couple males up on the flat, there's a couple males on the bed, caught them on the wacky rig. When I back out, I don't have to switch baits. I don't have to rig something new up. I just take that Nico rig or that stick bait and I add that little tungsten nail weight right to the head, just like that. And all of a sudden, I have a forward-facing or a deeper style bait that I can fish in 10, 12, 8, 5, 6, 7, 20 feet of water and just kind of stall that bait and just very gently hover it under some of these structures or in some of these deeper water situations, maybe a brush pile, run it over and just stall it and trigger those fish to come up that are in more of a pre-spawn mode. Now, a lot of times, you know, brim, things like that are going to be your bed invaders, but they're seeing so many stick baits that I'm starting to find either you go with something that just is glowy and bright. One of the great examples is like methylate or like a fluorescent pink, you know, like something super bright that just stands out, that's almost like offensive. Or you find something that almost looks like a bait fish that's so subtle, involves some maybe like some smoke color, maybe a little like blue sheen, that sort of translucent, that sort of, I don't know, that transparent style color almost. Use something that's ultra subtle because these fish are seeing so many stick bait. That's been a little trick that I've been using because that's one of the things that happens this time of year. You run into fish in a lot of different stages, right? Some of them are pre-spawn, some of them are staging, some of them are locked onto bed, dude. So you have to be able to sort of adapt as you go through to the situation. You have to do it quickly. So unless you got 27 rods rigged up, if you're looking for kind of one setup that you can cover all these situations with just small modifications, the wacky rig solves that problem, and that's kind of what I've been doing. And I don't know about you, but having one rod in my hand and focusing on that and just kind of slightly changing it up makes me a lot more fluid and a lot better at that rig, at that technique. I can really get focused in and dialed in on how they want it and present it just right to them. It's allowed me to fish a lot of this shallow stuff, fishing isolated targets, you know, looking for things that where they would bed. If there's a bed, that's where it's gonna be. I'm throwing that bait out and literally stupid fishing. I'm letting it sink, letting that worm just quiver on the way down, and dude, they're sucking it up and using that open hook, that Aaron Martin style hook, perfect, right? Or I'm on a little bit of a grass flat and I see a yellow spot and then I'm just kind of gently swimming it weightless, very slow, but weightless over this stuff and covering some water and drawing those fish out. And then the other thing is just fishing these isolated targets, whether they're docks, whether they're stumps, whether they're brush piles underwater. I'm able to add that weight, and then all of a sudden I have sort of a structure-oriented presentation that I can fish on forward-facing, just like a minnow, but I can fish it a lot slower. And for some reason in spring, these fish just seem to respond to that wacky rig 1,000 times better, as you've seen in the Bassmaster Classic, like a lot better than that minnow. I'm gonna show you two little hack tips. Both of them I learned from a buddy, dude. One I learned from Tim at Hammond's Fishing Center over on Lanier. He is the wacky rig master. And the other one I learned from my buddy Lowbrow Fishing, dude. He's got a YouTube channel. Always been a fan of this channel, dude, and I thought it was a pretty sick tip. So the first one that Tim showed me is whenever you're doing this wacky rig deal, you always want to, you put that little band on there that I did with my little Monster Bass Wacky Rig tool. You want to slide that Aaron Martin's hook so that the hook point is up towards the tail. And there's two reasons. One, it keeps it a little more weedless because the hook is actually lined up with the body of the worm. The other thing that it does is if you do add the weight, like we have that 1/16 ounce on there, it will keep that hook point so it's up, because this bait is going to fall like this. So when you're wacky rigging and sort of shaking the bait, it's going to be hook point up and you're not going to miss fish. If you have that hook point down, you're going to end up missing a bunch of fish. And this is the one that Lowbrow showed me. You take your scissors, and if you're looking to make this bait fall slower, what you do is you basically turn it into a two-ended tube. You make a bunch of cuts right at the end here, and you can do it with an X-Acto blade, you can do it with a scissors, you can do it with a variety of different tools, and it's a little tricky, and it does wreck a bait, but it's kind of a cool deal. But you end up getting something, it didn't do the greatest job, but it'll give you an idea. You end up getting something that creates a slower fall because the water has more resistance, because you've basically created just like little stringy tentacles on each side, and it causes that bait while it's freaking dancing to sort of undulate through those little arms and then slow the fall of that bait. That's gonna be a wrap on wacky rigging. Say that 3 times fast, dude. I'll put links to all this stuff, the tools that I use, that Monster Bass tool, as well as the baits at Tackle Warehouse for you guys to go check out. But if you're not throwing a wacky rig right now and you have spawning fish, staging fish, and fish about to go up, you're missing out, dude. It's a great way to cover water. You have to fish a little bit slower, but it's old school, dude. You can target those things on the bank. You can target those docks, target those stumps, tree falls, little grass holes, things like that very easily. And then you never have to change your bait. If you want to transition to fish that ditch that's just out from that spawning ground, fish that dock, fish those fish that are a little bit deeper, whether you're using forward facing or not. Kind of a cool tweak. Hope you guys enjoyed this. You got any tips for wacky rigging? Drop them down in the comments box below. I want to pack up and go fishing, so we will see you later, my homies.